Hey there folks, it's Dave, and this is the Blue Heron Outdoor School, and today I'm going to be showing you how to start the gourd stitch, the 3-drop stitch. And so you're going to start it the same way that you did the 2-drop stitch, or the peyote stitch, and you're going to wrap your thread around the item that you're working on and hold it tight, and then you're going to find out how many beads it takes to go around it. And in the last video that we did, we put beads around this thing and we found out that we have 45. And so now I'm going to take you in and let you see some graphics and show you kind of how the math works and how all this works out. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to arrange our beads in units of 3 around our object. And we need to figure out how many beads that's going to take. And so what we want to do is we want to put those first 2 rows, the red row and the yellow row, on our thread. And then we want to build in that 3rd row. So what we need to do is we need to figure out what 2/3 of our total number is and string those on our thread to get started. So here's the secret, here's the formula to starting the 3-drop stitch, the gourd stitch. You take the number of beads you have around your object, you multiply it by 2/3, and that will give you the number of beads that you need to start. Now if you do this formula and there's a remainder, you need to increase that answer to the nearest even number. And so the way this works out for us is that we have 45 beads around our object. Now 45 times 2/3, and I know some of you have forgotten how to multiply fractions, and I am not one to cast stones because I had to go back and figure it out again myself just so that I could make this animation for you. But the way it works is you take the number that you have here and you multiply it by the top. So 45 times 2 is 90, and then you take that number and you divide it by the bottom, and so 90 divided by 3 is equal to 30. So the number of beads that we need to start is 30. Now you need to check that answer and find out, because if there is a remainder, then you have to increase to the nearest number. But in our case, there's no remainder, so we need 30 beads to start with. Now, let's just try something completely different, just so that we can go through this again and let you see how it works. And we're going to start out with a different number entirely. In this case, we're going to start out with 28. It takes 28 beads to go around our hypothetical object. So 28 times 2/3. And the way we did it is just like the last time. We multiply 28 by the top, which is 56, and then we take that number and we divide it by the bottom, and so 56 divided by 3 is 18 with a remainder of 2. So the number of beads we need to start is 18 with a remainder of 2, but we have the remainder problem, and so we have to increase that number to the nearest even number. So 18, if you increase it, goes to 19, and that's not even. So we have to go one more. So in this particular hypothetical case, you would need to have 20 beads on your thread to start. But that's not our problem. We are back with 45 beads, and the number of beads that we need to start is 30. Okay, so here we are back again, and we're ready to actually get started. We have 2/3 of the beads that are on the same thread. So you actually have 2 rows that are on the same thread to start with. And so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding in that 3rd row and creating that 3-drop structure that's going to carry throughout the rest of the piece, or whatever it is we're going to do. So the way that you get this started is you've come around, you have your 30 beads, you wrap them around, and you hold them in place. In order to start, I'm going to hold this up close so you can see it. You take your needle and you go through those first 2 beads. Now if you remember on the peyote stitch we only went through 1, but on this one we're going to start by going through 2. Okay, and now the way this works is we're going to skip this bead and go through that one. We're going to add a bead onto our thread. Okay, we're going to skip this bead and go through that bead. And now I want to show you some more graphics. So when you place that first bead, you have a choice of where it's going to go. And so each one of these placements will affect your final outcome. And so in this video, I'm going to be putting the bead in position number 1, but I want you to know that it is possible to put it in other places and end up with different results. We will talk about that more in future videos. In our case, we're going to be putting that bead in that number 1 position, and that will create the Z line when it is all tightened. So now you know we have to make the decision about where this bead is going to fall. It either falls in the number 1 position over here, or 2, or 3, or 4. I like to make mine fall in the number 1 position. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that bead over to the side. So there's 3 of them over there. I'm going to go ahead and grab that bead, and I'm going to pull my thread around so that it's on the correct side for me. And that's my first bead. And right now you can't hardly tell anything about what's going on. So I grab my next bead, I pull that next bead over, and I go through the next one. So I skip a bead and go through the next one. Okay, now things are beginning to show up. You see this 3 bead structure starting here, and I'll do a couple more just so that you can see what's going on. I'll pull that next bead over, grab a bead, go through a bead, pull the tail out, pull the thread around. Okay, do you see what's happening there? Amazing, isn't it? I think it's amazing. I think it's a really cool thing. And so that's what I'm going to do. I go over, I pull my next bead over, grab a bead, and go through. Now, this whole thing about the skipping a bead and where you can put that next bead, that's really the secret to setting up the chevron stitch and everything that's going to go along after this, just to kind of give you a heads up. So that's the reason I went through explaining all of that and how it works. In this case, we're setting our first bead up in the number 2 position. I'm sorry, that's not true. We're setting our bead up in the number 1 position, and so it's establishing this Z line. Okay, and so I'm just going to go ahead and go around this thing and let you see what's happening. All right, so here we are. We're at the very end. I'm about to put my last bead on, and the way that I put my last bead on, it works the same way it does with the 2-drop stitch. I go through the bead that I go through the bead that I'm supposed to go through here, okay, and I also go through the first bead of the next row, and that is what sets up my 3-drop stitch. I think this is one of the most fascinating things, and whoever figured this out was a genius. I wish that I was smart enough to do that, But from here on, it's pretty simple. And all you do is you do the same thing you do in the 2-drop stitch. You pick up a bead, but you go to that next one and you pull that through, and that bead will fall into its little spot right there. And as long as you're going this direction, it's really pretty easy to do. Now, I like to set up my gourd stitch so that I'm working on that Z line, and the reason, of course, is because I'm right-handed, and that way I'm adding a bead to the end of the row each time, and when I tighten it down, it falls into its little spot and everything works out great. If I'm working on the S line, then it would work better if I were a left-handed person. And once you start doing chevron stitch and things like that, you're going to end up doing both things. But I prefer to be putting beads on the Z line, and so that's what I'm doing here. And so that's how that works. You set up your gourd stitch, and then you go to it. And we will talk a lot more in future videos about kind of how this works, how to change to chevron stitch, how to set up your chevron stitch in the beginning, all kinds of things. But this is how you set up a gourd stitch or a 3-drop stitch. Thank you all so much for watching.